This was my original PowerApps form, and this is the form after I modified it using a few simple steps. These easy steps will take your form designs from ugly to amazing every single time, whether you're a beginner or an experienced PowerApps developer. When I started developing PowerApps a couple of years ago, my forms were absolutely hideous, but over the years, the form designs and user experiences have gotten progressively better, and based on this, I formulated some steps which I use to this day for all of my clients. I will be sharing all of the steps I use in this video so you can use them when developing PowerApps forms in your workplace. With that being said, let's get into the video. To help with this session, I've designed a simple product servicing app where company staff can log details for all product servicing appointments. On this page, we have a list of all servicing appointments, and we are going to build a form based on this data set. We also have a product page that lists all the possible products in the system.
They're nice.
If you want to know how I built this gallery, the surrounding UI, the custom search bars, and basically all of this, check out my videos on my Modern PowerApps UI series playlist. If you also want to know how I built this collapsible sidebar navigation, let me know in the comments below so I can create a dedicated video on how to do this. So let's build our form now. In PowerApps, we have two main form control categories. The first one is what we have known since the release of PowerApps, and that is the classic form control. As for the second category, Microsoft released the modern form control a few weeks ago. Though it is still in public preview, you can now use them on your apps. That brings us to our first step in creating modern looking forms, which is selecting the appropriate form control. One of the most important things to take note of before you start developing your custom forms is to understand the basic structure of your chosen form control. Understanding the difference between the two form controls is key because that will inform your decision on which one to use when building your apps. So let's take a look at some of these differences. Starting with the classic form control, let's add it on a screen, set the data source and the form mode. As you can see, its default design looks really basic and even outdated. For example, look at the date picker control or even the text input controls and drop down. You would notice this looks nothing like the sleek modern apps pro-code developers build today. Now, let's have a look at the modern form control. If you don't see the modern tab, make sure it is enabled in your studio settings. I'll add the form on the screen, set the data source and the form mode. And right away you can see the stark difference between the two base designs. The text inputs have some cool animations, the date picker looks much better, and the drop downs render neatly on the screen. Looking at these differences, you will think that the modern form control is superior to the classic form control in every aspect, right? One thing to note is that though the base design of the modern form control is really cool, its customization options are painfully little when compared to the classic form control. For example, though this is the base design of the classic form control, we will be customizing it to look like this later on in the video. This is another custom form design we will build based on the classic form control. As at the time of this recording, we can't create these custom designs based on the modern form control. For example, let's try creating a dark theme form. I will set my page color to the blue I showed earlier in the video. Here, we can't even customize the field label color to white. The most we can do is change the size, the weight, and style of the field label. As for the input controls, customizations are limited to control size and animation colors only. So now, is the modern form control still superior to the classic form control in every aspect? The good news is that the modern form control is still in preview, so more customization options might be added in the coming months. With that knowledge, here is my advice on how to select the appropriate form control for your different apps. If you are fine with the modern form control's base design, and you don't want to spend too much time on customizations, and your app is light themed, the modern form control is good for you. However, if you are building a dark themed app, or you want your form to have a custom design, and you are fine with the customization time, the classic form control is the best for you. So let's go straight into our form build. The first thing to do when building the modern form is to actually add the form control.
Whoa. Nah, I never knew that.
As I said earlier, we will be using the classic form control. On the Insert tab, search for Form and pick Edit Form. Display form is also a classic form control, however, it can only be used to display existing data. The edit form control can add, edit, or view existing data. This is because it has a form mode property where we can change its default mode. In this case, we will set it to new. Let's also select our data source. Though this video is focused on customizing your form's UI, there are a few things you need to understand first. Each form control has data cards that house a label and input. You can't directly add a PowerApps control to a form without it being housed by a data card. That brings us to the next step, which is to add data cards. My data source is a dataverse table, so it automatically adds a data card for each column in my table's default view. You have the ability to add or remove data cards for each column you want in your form. You may also reorder the data card to fit your requirements. Once you've added all your data cards, we move to step 3, which is to set up our data card sizes. The form control has a snap to columns property, which is on by default. What this does is to fit your data cards within whatever column allocation you've set on your form control. For instance, let's change our columns to 4 and try to expand the appointment date data card. You would notice that this can either fit 1, 2, 3, or 4 columns and no in-betweens. This is because it is snapping to the columns. If we turn snap to columns off, you would notice you can now set custom widths for your data cards. Each data card has a property called width fit. Turning this on makes a data card fill whatever space is left on a form's row. Take for instance, customer email and customer phone. Turning width fit on for all data cards is advised for those developing responsive apps. Also, data cards are vertically responsive by default, so you don't have to worry about data card height. It automatically expands to house all its controls. For example, if we increase the height of customer name text input to 80, the data card stretches to house this. If we reduce the input height, it comes back to normal. You also have the ability to manually increase the data card's height. What happens in this case is that the data card will only expand if the height of all its components are greater than its manual height. Once you're done with all your configurations, you move to the next step. In our case, let's reset all of this by turning on snap to columns and reducing the height. Step 4 is the data card structure updates. This step refers to all changes to be made to individual data cards, and it is divided into 2 sub-steps. The first sub-step is the basic data card structure update, and refers to changes that can be made without unlocking a data card. This includes simple control customizations like changing font size or type, the fields, the borders, and all of that. The second sub-step is the advanced data card structure updates. This refers to changes that can only be made by unlocking a data card. This includes changes where you need to add or remove controls from a data card. Since our form design will include both basic and advanced data card structure updates, we will need to unlock all the data cards. You can either do this in the advanced property panel on the right or the tree view on the left. As far as I know, there is no option to bulk unlock all the data cards, so you have to do it one by one. So for those building forms with a lot of data cards, well, good luck. After unlocking the data cards, the first update I make is the left alignment of controls. This step is optional, but if you have noticed, the field labels and inputs are 30 pixels away from the left of the data card. This is because of the star label that becomes visible if a field is required. This sometimes makes a screen's alignment look off. So what I do is to delete the star label, add it to the field label, and then move the field label and inputs to the left. Now, for those of you with a lot of data cards, you are most likely wondering if you have to make this change one by one. But there is a trick I learned from a forms video of the PowerApps goat Reza Durrani.
Hello everyone, Reza here.
This allows you to bulk update all field labels and inputs on your form, so you don't have to do this change one by one.
Thank God.
To do this, change your form's layout to horizontal and undo that change using Ctrl Z or the undo button in the top left. This will select all the field labels and inputs in your form. While using this trick, Ctrl or Shift clicking another control will not add it to your selection, but doing this to a selected control will unselect it. So let's change the X property of all controls to 5 and change the width to parent the width minus 30. Now let's unselect all our input control by shift clicking them. Then we change the text property to this. This will concatenate a star only if a field is required. Now that is done, let's delete the original star label. Unfortunately, there is no trick to bulk delete all of this, so you have to do it one by one. The next thing I do is field label customizations. One thing to note, all colors I will use on the app has been stored in variables using the app's onStart property. So let's first use our trick to select all the labels and then let's customize it as needed. I will change the color to my primary text color, which is a very light gray. I will also reduce the size to 8 pixels to match the rest of my app. And finally, I'll change the font. As you might know, PowerApps has 14 default fonts for you to choose from. However, you can add a literal font name in double quotes. That doesn't mean you should go ahead and add weird fonts like Old English Text MT or Algerian into your app.
Oh, what is wrong with you? Oh my God!
A downside of this is that the target devices need to have the font installed. Hence, it is best to stick to safe web fonts available on all web browsers by default, or add a fallback font by using a comma. For example, I might want to use the Google font Roboto, but I will also add Arial as a fallback font in case the target devices don't have Roboto. In this case, I will just use Lato for all the font labels. Now we are done with the labels, let's move to the input controls. The first thing I change is the border colors. All inputs get their border colors from the parent data card, so let's change it from there. First, we control click the data cards in the tree view, and once more than one is selected, we hit Ctrl A to select all the data cards in the form. We then change the borders. In my case, I will use one of the app colors, which is actually a bit similar to what we had there. Next, we change our input control properties. Let's select all input controls using our trick, then we change the fill to our tertiary color. One thing a lot of developers fail to do is to customize the hover and pressed properties of their field inputs. So let's do that. I will change the hover fill to match the rest of the app. This is white with 10% opacity. I also don't want to change the border color when I hover, so I will set hover border color to self the border color. And you can see the difference already. Then I do the same for the pressed color properties. I will change the press fill to match the rest of the app. This is white with 20% opacity. And also, I will change the press border color to self the border color. By the way, I'm holding Alt to test. This is so that I won't need to reselect everything again after going into preview mode and coming back. The next thing I modify is the border thickness. By default, all border thickness is set to 2, while the focus border thickness is set to 4. Focus border thickness refers to the thickness of an input border when it is in focus or active. Now, this is personal opinion, but I think that is too thick. I prefer them to be a little bit leaner. In light themed apps, I set the border thickness to 1 and the focus border thickness to 2. However, in dark themed apps, I increased this by 1, so that's 2 and 3 respectively. And this is only because white space tends to look smaller on a dark background. Next, I change the font type, size, and color. In this case, I will change the font type to Lato, set the color to my primary text color, and set the size to 9. I'll also decrease the height of all controls to 30. So now, except that is the aesthetic you're going for, you should add a little border radius to all your inputs to prevent your app from looking too boxy. Since text inputs are the only input control with a native border radius property, let's start with that. First, unselect any control that is not a text input and then add a border radius of 5. And that looks much better already. As for the other inputs with no native border radius property, we will also handle them, but let's postpone that for now. This is because we would have to do advanced data structure updates to make this change. And what this means is that our trick to select all inputs will no longer work since there has been an advanced data card structure update. I want to style all our combo boxes in bulk first. And if there is any change you also want to do in bulk, do those first before you make any advanced data structure updates to either your field labels or your input controls.
Okay.
So now let's use our trick to select all combo boxes and begin styling. First, we start with the chevron. This refers to the little arrow icon and the space around it. The chevron width is self-explanatory. I'll leave that as 34. The chevron fill refers to the color of the actual icon. I will change that to match my border. The chevron overfill refers to the color of the icon during mouse hover. I don't want this to change, so I'll set it to be the same as my chevron fill. The chevron background, self-explanatory. I'll make this transparent to make the combo boxes look more modern. The chevron over background will be changed to match the hover fills on the rest of my app. And this is a white with 10% opacity. Next, let's move to the selection. The selection color refers to the text color of a selected item in the combo box. I will change this to my primary text color. The selection fill refers to the background of a selected item in the combo box. I will change this to a transparent white. Next, let's move to the hover properties. The hover color refers to the text color of a selected item when shown as a preview or hovered on in the combo box. For instance, if I change it to pink, you can see how it reflects. I will change it to my primary text color. The hover fill controls the background color of a selected item when shown as a preview or when hovered on in the combo box. And for instance, if I change this to green, you can see how it reflects. I will change this back to the transparent white. Lastly, let's go to the focus border thickness. While this property controls thickness of a border in other controls, in combo boxes, it behaves a little differently. Here, it gives a dotted border when you open a combo box. Many clients don't like this, so I always remove it. To do this, just set focus border thickness to 0. As for the date picker, we only need to worry about two properties. Let's change the icon fill to match our borders, and let's make the icon background transparent. And just look at that. Doesn't it look so much better already?
Yes.
Now we are done with all the bulk updates. Let's do the border radius for the remaining controls. First, let's add a non-responsive container into the data card. Then you make sure its position and size are set to the same values as our input control. Here, the X value is 5 and the height value is 30. So let's copy that. Let's also copy the Y and the width properties. So now, cut the input control using Ctrl X and paste it into the container. Make sure it fills the container by setting the X and Y to 0 and setting the width and height to parent the width and parent the height respectively. Next, copy the border color property from your input control and paste it into your container. Then set the border thickness and border radius to match the rest of your form. In our case, it's 2 and 5 respectively. Also, clear the drop shadow if you don't want it and set the input control border type to none to prevent double borders. Then, let's fix all the errors. The control is trying to access its parent data by using the parent keyword. However, the data card is no longer the direct parent of the control. Instead, it is the container. So to fix this, anywhere the input control is trying to access the data card via the parent keyword, change that to reference the data card directly. So let's copy the data card name and replace parent wherever there is an error with that name. Don't forget to enclose this in single quotes if your data card name has a space. And lastly, let's change the error label's Y property to reference the container instead of the input control. And with that, you can apply border radius to any input control that doesn't have a border radius property. Let's do the same thing for all the combo boxes. The next change is more of a UX change than a UI change. If I have a combo box or drop down with only 2 or 3 options, I always change this to a radio button instead. And if it is a multi-select field, I change it to checkboxes. This will reduce the number of clicks by 50% since they can directly select their option. For instance, the service type field has only 3 options, so I will change this to a radio. To do this, add a radio control to the data card. Then you make sure its position and size are set to the same value as our combo box control. Here, the X is 5 and the height is 30. So let's copy that. Let's also copy the Y and the width properties. Then you can change the data source to match the combo box. Set the default to parent.default and set the layout to horizontal. Then you do any other styling. In our case, I will change the font type to Lato, the font size to 9, and the radius size to 18. I will change the radio selection fill to my accent color, the radio background fill to my tertiary color, and the radio border color to my secondary text color. The last step is to copy the combo box name, delete it, and rename the radio with that same name. This will save you the stress of having to re-reference the new control in place of the old one. Note that this only works because the radio control and the combo box control have similar output properties. I also made a video some time ago on how to convert combo boxes to checkboxes, so check that out if your combo box is a multi-select field. Now, if you compare this to our starting form, you see how much more gorgeous our form now looks.
I like it a lot.
You could even argue that we could end it all here, but there are still more upgrades we can apply to our form.
This is not over.
But before that, if you've at least learned something in this video, please support the channel by hitting that subscribe button and like the video so it can be pushed to a wider audience of PowerApps developers like you. So let's get back into our video. A lot of PowerApps developers think there are only two form layouts you can use for your PowerApps forms: the vertical and the horizontal layout. What you don't know is that there are hidden layouts that can be used. For example, the enclosed vertical layout.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I'm only joking, as at the time of this recording, PowerApps forms in fact have only two default layouts, which is the horizontal and the vertical.
We like to troll. We do a little trolling. It's called we do a little trolling.
But that doesn't mean you can't create your own custom layouts. That brings us to our next step, which is setting up any custom layout. It's an optional step and it mainly depends on the creativity of the developer. What we've done so far can even be classified as a custom layout because we deleted the start label and moved the field label and input controls to the left. However, we can even take this further. Take for instance, in this custom layout, I have deleted all field labels and added their text as hint text on all input controls. In this other layout, I've enclosed all data card components inside a rounded container. So as you can see, it largely depends on the creativity of the developer. The only important thing to note is that 1, if the data card is no longer a direct parent of the field label or input control, make sure you reference the data card directly instead of using the parent keyword. This is similar to what we did when we added border radius to the combo boxes. And 2, make sure the data card update property is pointing to the correct input control. So this is so that the correct data will be sent to your data source. So the first custom layout is rather straightforward. So let's build the second layout. First, let's add the vertical responsive container to the data card. Then set the X and Y property to 0. Let's also set the width to parent the width and set the height to 200 for now. I will give it a top and bottom padding of 10 and a left and right padding of 5. I will also clear border radius, and drop shadow. Next, I'll add in another vertical responsive container inside our original container. I will set the width alignment to stretch, the minimum width to 0. I will turn off flexible height, set the height to 150 for now, set the top padding to 5, set all other padding to 10, clear the drop shadow, set a border radius of 10, and set the background color to my tertiary color, which is blue. The next step is to cut the field label and input control using Ctrl X. Since I've enclosed the date picker in a container to give it a border radius, I will cut that instead and paste both of them inside of the inner container. While they are both selected, I'll set the width alignment to stretch, set the min width to 0, and turn off flexible height. Most of the errors are because the controls can no longer access the data card properties using the parent keyword, so we will reference the data card directly. Copy the data card name and replace parent in all errors. Don't forget to enclose it in single quotes if it has a space. Then, change the height of the input control to be as desired. There is a PowerApps Studio bug that sometimes makes height changes of non-responsive containers within responsive containers to not reflect on the app. The way around this is to first change it to 0 and then change it to your desired height. This is a PowerApps Studio bug that I hope will get fixed soon.
Eventually.
Next, set the height of the inner container so that it will only have enough space for the field label and input control. To do that, set its height to its bottom padding, plus its top padding, plus its field label height, plus the input control height. In this case, we've enclosed the input control inside of a container to give it a border radius, so we use its height instead. Then, I'll clear the borders I've set before by setting border type to none. And I'll add a line under the input control to make it look neat. To do that, I'll use a rectangle control. I'll set its height to 1, set the alignment to stretch, set the min width to 0, and then I'll copy the border color value from my input control and use that as my rectangle color. Lastly, I'll cut the error label and paste it inside the main container or outside of the rounded blue container. This is because I want the errors to display outside of that rounded blue container. I'll do some styling and make sure it references the data card correctly to fix the error. You can also test how the error label will look by adding some dummy text. Once you are satisfied, change the height of the parent container so there is only enough space for the inner container and the error label. To do that, set its height to its bottom padding plus its top padding plus the error label's height plus the inner container's height. Replicate that for all your data cards, and with that, you've successfully completed your custom layout.
Nice.
So at this point, you've fully customized your form, modified your data cards, and even done your custom layouts. That brings us to the last step on the list, which is the form control structure update. This step involves organizing your data cards in a way that is easy for your app users to understand and navigate your form. This step is especially important for those with a lot of data cards, because no matter how pretty your form is, if it is difficult to navigate, your design is all for naught. There are multiple methods of organizing your data cards, so I'll just go through the most popular ones. The first method is by separating your form into sections. In this method, you can do something as simple as a text header for all your form sections. For example, let's add in 3 custom data cards to serve as our 3-section header. Once added, rearrange your data cards as required, with section headers coming first and section fields coming immediately after. After rearranging, set all custom headers to fill the form width. I will control-click all 3 of the custom data cards and set the width to parent the width. I'll also set the width fit to true and reduce the height to 40. Next, I'll resize the rest of the data cards to look nice. Once that is done, in the section headers, I'll add in a simple horizontal container and resize it to fill the data card. I will set the X value and the Y value to 0. I'll set the width to parent the width, and I'll set the height to 40. And then I'll add in a text label inside of the container. As for the text label, I'll set the height alignment to stretch, the minimum height to 0, and turn on flexible width. I will then style the font as desired and change text name to my section name. I will copy and paste this container inside all of our other section headers and rename them accordingly. In the other sections, I'll increase the Y value of the container so there is enough space between the sections. Your sections can be something as simple as this, or you can even add a line to separate section header and section content, or you can even make them collapsible like what I did here.
Hey, that's pretty good.
I've already created a video on how to do this, so check that out. But basically, I have a blue container with an icon, section label, and custom button to toggle the visibility of the section content. Clicking the button toggles my Boolean variable, and that in turn controls the visibility of my data cards. Another method of organizing your data cards is to use form tabs. Here, you separate all your data cards into tabs to enable easy navigation on your form. I've also created a video on how to do this, so check that out. But here is the general idea. I've added a container just above the form, and inside this container is a horizontal gallery. The data source is this. It contains all different tabs and an ID to uniquely identify the different tabs. The gallery contains a transparent button, a text label, and a rectangle. On click of the button, it sets the variable to my current tab ID. and that in turn controls the visibility of my data cards. Lastly, the rectangle indicator is only visible if a tab is the active one. Another variation of the form tabs is to make a vertical tab. This method is basically the same as the horizontal tab method, except in this method, we use a vertical gallery instead of an horizontal gallery. In this view, I added a little more detail because of our increased real estate. The data source contains two additional columns, one for the icon and one for the tab details. In the gallery, we still have a transparent button that does all the clicking and a rectangle that serves as an indicator. But we also have a horizontal container that contains our icon, another vertical container that contains our tab label and tab description. The last form organizing method I'll talk about is the multi-screen form. In this method, you separate your data cards across multiple screens. For example, service details will be on screen 1, customer info on screen 2, and other details on screen 3. This organization method is mostly for apps where you want users to fill in the data in a progressive manner. You also don't need to make multiple calls to the data source, but you can just make one call at the end of the whole process. I've created a video on how to do this step by step, so check that out if you're interested. Hopefully by now you should be able to make your own custom form designs in PowerApps without being limited to the default form designs. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you can get notified when I drop a new video. Also, please like the video so it can get recommended to other PowerApps developers. And until next time, bye.